Sumit Sarkar, as the various tributes in the last 7 days have reminded us, was an inspiring teacher, a committed public intellectual, a fine polemicist, a wonderful stylist in his writing, a soft-spoken, gentle human being. But above all, he was one of the greatest practitioners of social history in the world. I think if we look at his work, there are certain constitutive ideas, certain ideas which frame all his writings. He was a Marxist, a self-proclaimed Marxist who remained Marxist till the end, at a time when Marxism was being renounced by other Marxists in the world. He was someone who is a Marxist, but a Marxist with an open mind. Someone who was always open to new traditions of thought, new insights that were being thrown up in the public sphere. He was always rethinking his ideas, his Marxism, through the prism of the new, absorbing what he saw as productive and insightful and rejecting all that he saw problematic. So critique was one of the important ideas, constitutive ideas that shaped his thinking and shaped his writing and shaped his public presence within the world. Opening up to the new, opening up to new traditions, then defining his distance from those traditions, developing a critique of those ideas. He opened up to subaltern studies, but wrote some of the sharpest critique of subaltern studies. He opened up to postmodernism, the linguistic turn, the discursive turn, postcolonialism, but he wrote some of the sharpest critique of postmodernism. He was a nationalist, but again, wrote some of the sharpest critique of nationalism. He would have liked to believe that he had transcended nationalism, but I think he never could transcend his original embeddedness within the nationalist frame. His nationalism was more complex and more nuanced than we see amongst the nationalist historians of our time. This just shows his ideas were never imprisoned within any rigid boundaries. He was constantly seeking to transcend those boundaries. This, after all, I think, was also Marx's method. Constantly opening up to new ideas, new political economy from Mill to Ricardo, all philosophies from Hegel to others, and then critiquing them, defining his distance and transcending them. And this, as Marx would call, is the process of opening up, subsuming, and transcending. And this also was Sumit Sarkar's method, not just in the process of his writing, but as a citizen of the world. This went along with another framing idea that defined his writing. He celebrated heterogeneity. He was opposed to any monochromatic picture of anything. No movement was homogeneous. No ideology was monochromatic. There were always inner tensions, contradictions, different strands of thought, different traditions of thought within a social movement, just as much as there was a broad pattern, a coherence. So coherence was always ruptured, broken by these traditions, but they all come together in his writing into a coherence. So he's not celebrating either the fragment nor rejecting it, not celebrating a monochromatic whole or totality, but making it more complex and nuanced. This was his defining feature even in the first book that he wrote, that is the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. In that book, Sumit brings out in fascinating detail, with a wealth of evidence, all that was heroic and tragic, sublime and quixotic in those dramatic, eventful years of Bengal. We have no simple story of success and failure, no celebrity accounts of great deeds and noble figures, no linear unfolding of events which unfold to a climax. Instead of the monochromatic picture, a homogeneous narrative, what Sumit offers us are the many layered streams within the Swadeshi movement. All of them needed to be understood, all of them showing the inner contradictions and tensions within the movement. All of them had to be unpacked, and Sumit offers us that, even in the PhD thesis that he wrote, and which is rare to see a PhD thesis written with such nuance and complexity. In the 1970s, Sumit opens up to new strands of thinking of the time that were maturing at the time and circulating in the intellectual sphere. This is the time of his subaltern turn, the 70s, and this is the time of his engagement, deep engagement with E.P. Thompson. E.P. Thompson doesn't figure so much in his early book, the first book, Swadeshi Movement. But 70s is a time he's immersed in the writings of E.P. Thompson, and of course becomes a good personal friend by the late 70s. He's also immersed in the 70s in the micro-history of the time, Ginsberg and many others who wrote of the time. And this engagement transformed the way he visualized the book that he published in 1983, which is referred to as a textbook, but which I don't think is a textbook. It's a book written for the public, for the general reader, which became also a textbook. It was, I think it's a misnomer. Within this book, Modern India, we see how Sumit, as a Marxist, is grappling with these new ideas and synthesizing them in the book. He was always referred, as a Marxist, he was always sensitive to the popular movement. But in this book, the role of the subaltern classes, the role of the Dalits, the workers, the peasants and Dalits acquire a constitutive role. They define what nationalism was. They redefine the vision of nationalism. And that's not something he really actually elaborates in the first book. The different strands, different streams coalesced, creating a wider national movement that was plural, that was democratic, that was open-ended. Each strand had to be grasped, and the inner life of each had to be understood. The logic of each had to be respected. When I read it first, I was absolutely amazed by the richness of the book and the effortless ease with which he could weave dense details of regional movements and regional politics into this coherent whole, which was the national movement. So the nationalism is both a coherence as well as marked by these inner fractures and different streams, something which is there written as a comment, a quote from him in the poster itself. This was almost like a patchwork quilt, where the patches, in vibrant colors, where the patches are important. They have an independence. They retain their independence, but all these patches come together to form the quilt, which has a form, a social body, and which is something which can be seen as constituted by those patches. And I think this is something which he retains till the end. The capacity to go down, give you the detail, but bring the coherence back and argue for that coherence in a certain sense. Microhistory again is shaping his ideas in the 70s, and for me, one of the essays, all these essays come together in a book he published in the late 1980s, 87 I think. This essay is published in 87 in Subaltern Studies 6. And this is an essay on the Kalki avatar of Bikrampur, a village scandal in early 20th century Bengal, published in the 89 Subaltern Studies 6. In this fascinating essay, Sumit showed in wonderful detail how a dramatic incident enacted one night by a sadhu and his followers in Doihata village of Dhaka districts of Bengal tell us so much about the social world of that time, which we cannot know from conventional methods of history. He shows how seemingly unimportant events like this allow us an oblique entry into the social world, and how the myths and beliefs the conditions of social life, the anxieties and tensions of the time, everything is revealed through this event, which is enacted in macabre detail by a sadhu and his followers in the household of a upper caste and Bengal. In the 1990s, from the mid-1990s, Sumit becomes a fellow of NMML, Nehru Memorial, and this is a time of intense intellectual engagement in a new way. He's now opening up to the discursive turn from the early 90s, discursive turn and the linguistic turn, the postmodern turn, as well as the post-colonial turn. Now his ideas begin to gel together by the mid-90s when he is in Nehru Memorial, and he recognizes that and writes about it also. Once again, he negotiates these ideas, as I said. He absorbs what he thinks is good, and he critiques and writes 2 or 3 critiques of postmodernism at this time. And over the next 10 years. Once again, we see this productive, critical engagement producing wonderful essays at the time, and which ultimately is published, brought together in 1998 as Writing Social History. And my personal favorite is Kaliyug, Chakri and Bhakti, Ramakrishna and his time, published in 1998. This is an essay that shows how he was negotiating the linguistic turn, the cultural turn, the textual turn, the narrative turn, and how he was creatively absorbing them, and at each moment defining his own critique as he wrote those histories. He explores in this essay in very nuanced way how figures like Ramakrishna had a wide audience. How does his thought, a specific version of bhakti, appeals to peasants, to bhadraloks, to middle classes? He has a wide audience. He unpacks the paradoxes and contradictions of Ramakrishna's thought, the ambiguities and the ambivalences, and he looks at his text, the Kathamrita, with the fine eye of someone who is unpacking by integrating the insights of the textual and the narrative turn. His speech, he argues, was dialogic, constantly developing through Ramakrishna's interaction with the audience. And he shows how his ideas that he spelled out in Kathamrita has inner ambiguities which allows him to connect to different audiences, the middle classes, the peasants, and the bhadraloks. He unpacks the text, looks at its contradictions, looks at its paradoxes, looks at its inner tensions, and then offers us a picture of Ramakrishna, who is interacting with the audience, very aware of the composition of that audience and orienting his arguments and ideas in interaction with the audience. So the whole celebration, the whole argument about audience and reception in narrative theory is integrated here. So the audience is discussed not only in terms of its social composition, but specifically how the audience reframes his ideas and forces him to change his ideas over a period of time. What is interesting are many other details within his arguments. He discusses how Ramakrishna often dressed like a woman, talked like a child, acted like a mad sadhu. And each of these acts had meaning. These had significance, and that significance had to be analyzed. And he offers us all that in this wonderful masterly essay on the Kali Yuga. And finally, after using all the linguistic turn and the discussion term and their he brings it all together to talk of the social milieu of the time, the inner tensions, the frustrations of the middle classes, those who are doing chakri and the clerks of the time, and demonstrates the dialogic way in which the audience of this Ramakrishna's thought interacts with this, and that social milieu offers us an insight into why Ramakrishna's thought had resonance of the time. This is also a period where he's doing all this, that he is, as I said already, critiquing postmodernism. Sumit was a great synthesizer. And the qualities of his two great works for the people, Popular Moon, that is the first one, the Modern India, and 25 years later, he publishes Modern Times. Both these works are wonderful examples of synthesis and wonderful examples of history written for the wider public. Very few historians can reach out in the way he could reach out through this rigorous works of intellectual synthesis. This was a different conjuncture when he published this book. It was a different moment in the history of our discipline, and it was a different moment in Sumit's intellectual journey. All through the 90s, as I said, Sumit had immersed himself in the new traditions of discursive thought, but beyond the linguistic discursive turns, etc., he was reading voraciously on environmental history, history of water, history of air, history of forests, history of pastures, all these things, and all these come together in the writing of this book, the masterly book, Modern Times. The structure of the book was also different from the first one. In the first one, his approach was chronological. And within the chronology, he talked of the regions. And in this one, instead of going chronologically, which he thought, I think, that fragmented the picture, he gives us the long term, the long synthesis over a long term. The first chapter draws upon the new studies of census, surveys, print culture, studies of power and knowledge, colonial discourse and law. New studies of environment, forests, pastures, commons, water shape the second and third chapter. And the new studies of leisure, visual histories, popular prints, photographs, calendar art become critical for the last chapter. So there's a huge panoramic history here, but all enriched through his constant engagement with the world of literature, historical, theoretical, conceptual literature of the time. I would like to end on a personal note. All those who have written have been Sumit's students, and Sumit, everyone has celebrated as a brilliant teacher. Aparna, Rahul, Shahana, many others have written wonderful tributes on Sumit. I would like to talk of him as a listener, not just somebody who talked, but who listened. Academics, I suggest, are interested in talking. They love their own voice, and very few really want to listen to what the other person has said. Sumit was that rare academic who was a great listener. I do not usually talk about my writings and projects in detail with academic colleagues for fear of burdening them with things they're not really interested in knowing and hearing. And you can see the interest flags after a while. But Sumit had a charming way of drawing you out, make you talk, elaborate your ideas at length. You could see his intense concentration as you talked, his twinkling, inquisitive eyes, his genuine desire to know, his mind constantly making mental notes, and then he would ask probing questions, seek clarifications, helping you to think through your ideas and helping you to formulate your ideas. I still remember that evening many years back when Aditya was small, still in school, when I landed up in Sumit and Tanika's flat in Delhi, and Sumit wanted me to talk about my book projects. Reticent at first, I started to chat. Food was ordered, and over dinner we continued to discuss for hours. I came back that night feeling good. I felt intellectually energized and affirmed. I felt that my ideas, the questions that I was posing, had worth. They were possibly more interesting and more important than I ever thought. That is what I've always felt when I've talked to Sumit. So his going is also a huge personal loss for me.